requested to welcome everyone and begin the program. So, first of all, thank you for all the to all the participants for registering and taking interest in this very important subject, which is going to be really critical as we, as Pakistan, as a country, move towards the tipping point and become sustainable, AI equipped, and obviously the investments have to be. We have to focus on investments coming into our country. So we need to equip ourselves. And I think from that perspective, it is a very important session to be part of and learn from. And it is an opportunity to have the speakers who are here today. Before anything, I would request Kalita to please come and do some tilawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم صدق الله العظيم.
I would now like to request Mr. Asif Qureshi to he's CEO of UBL Funds and Director CFA Society to please come to the stage and then introduce all the speakers.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Asif Qureshi. I'm a director of CFA Society Pakistan, and I would like to welcome all of you to today's seminar on AI energy transition for sustainable investing, which is a collaborative effort between the CFA Society Pakistan and the Pakistan Stock Exchange. AI, energy transition, and climate sustainability are perhaps the most important investment themes of the day, not just in Pakistan, but globally as well, more so globally than perhaps in Pakistan. The disruptive potential of AI, the transformative promise of energy transition and the future of our planet, given the climate change in terms of its impact on humanity and for all the businesses as well. I think they present a whole host of opportunities and challenges. And we are lucky that we have a great panel of speakers today who are going to share their insights on these topics. So let me introduce them one by one and request them to kindly take the seats on the stage. So our first speaker is Ms. Mubashira Khawaja. She is a seasoned investor, investing in global emerging markets for 18 years. She is currently investment director at Aberdeen, a FTSE-listed global asset management company. During her career, she has run thematic funds focused on infrastructure and sustainable energy. So Mubashira, please join us on the stage. Our second speaker is Mr. Kamran Kamal, who is the CEO of HUBCO, as you must already know, which is one of the largest and most diversified energy companies in Pakistan with a portfolio spanning power, mining, oil and gas, and electric vehicles. With over 20 years of experience in energy, infrastructure, and commodities, Kamran has consistently demonstrated strong leadership and a keen strategic vision. Since taking over as CEO of HUBCO in 2021, he has spearheaded a shift towards operational excellence and sustainability. Under its leadership, HAPCO has entered electric vehicle sector through a landmark partnership between HAPCO and BYD. The world's largest BYD is, as we know, is the world's largest EV manufacturing company. So I would request Kamran to kindly join us on the stage. And finally, Mr. Farrukh Sabzwari, who is the CEO of Pakistan Stock Exchange. Mr. Sabzwari has over 30 years of experience in investment banking, corporate governance, regulatory affairs. He's held senior management positions at local and international institutions. He's also served as the chairman of SCT. So, Mr. Sabzwari, if I could request, kindly join us on the stage. So I would like to first request Ms. Mubashira to take the podium, or if she wants to keep sitting on the chair and to deliver her presentation. Okay, perfect. There you go.
Thank you for the introduction. Mr. Yusuf will help with the presentation, if that's okay. It's always a pleasure to be at PSX, and thank you very much to the CFA Society again for inviting me and for PSX for hosting us. Today's event, the topic is artificial intelligence and energy transition. Artificial intelligence is a topic that is perfect. Thank you. So artificial intelligence is a topic which is quite emotive because there are differing views between investors. Some believe that it will be a force of change for good, while others raise questions about whether it will be ethical or not, about the usage of AI. But one thing which we can all agree on is that it will be revolutionized and it will change the world that we live in. So it is important to know what AI is and what are the implications on some other factors, such as electricity usage and sources of electricity, which is a big theme in sustainable investing as a result of the rise of AI. So today we will focus on not necessarily what AI is, but we will focus on how the rise of artificial intelligence will change the energy transition, or I would say speed fast the transition towards cleaner use of energy. I have a couple of slides here, and I will go through them. But the idea is to keep this interactive. So if you have questions, go for it, or we can ask them again. So the first slide we have here, is it possible to get rid of the top part? Is only showing us the current energy mix globally. So how is the source of energy split by the type of power? And you can see that if you look at the top chart, you can see a lot of blue. And all of these blues are basically coal, natural gas, oil, which we now call dirty fuels. And it's only a small portion which is renewable, so wind and solar energy, hydro, which is water energy, or nuclear. And this is very small. If you sum it all up, it would come to about 18% of global energy mix today. Targets, if you look at country by country or overall, are much more, they appear much bigger and they are quite challenging to reach. But we are already on the way towards it, or I would say the last 1 decade, when there was a greater awareness of climate change happening and the need for having to do something about it all over the world, not just in advanced developed markets, but also in emerging markets like China, India. In fact, China has been spreading the contribution towards clean energy. So 18% is what we can see at the top, the 4% from nuclear, the 6% from hydro, and then the 8% at the top from renewables, which we can see is clean energy, it's the relevant portion which we want to see growth in the energy mix. One thing which I would like to highlight here is that renewables has been there for a number of years, at least the last decade.
Maybe you want to just hold that for 2 seconds.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe you can just continue there. You could on to the.
किसी की तेरी बात पसंद नहीं आती
You're good too.
Thank you very much. Okay. One thing which is important to highlight is if we talk about three sources of clean energy, nuclear is very new. New in the sense, not because it's a new power source, but because it is newly becoming more interesting as a power source which can be used in future. And the reason is not climate change. It was always a possibility. It was expensive. It was costly to develop, took a long time. But the reason why there is a greater interest in nuclear energy now is AI. So not climate change, but AI, because the need for electricity has grown many folds because of the expectation that AI will rise. We have charts later on, but just to give you a sense, because of AI, if you do a regular, normal Google search, it takes a certain amount of electricity for that search to complete. It takes 30 times more electricity or power for search to complete on ChatGPT. And the reason for that is that AI is all data-based. So there's a lot of data. It has to search through all the data on the internet on that particular topic to come up with an answer which is human-like. And that's the favorite thing for anyone to do. Even kids know about it nowadays, and expectations are, that this is just the beginning. We don't even know how much the demand for AI will rise. I will share a simple story. My husband asked my 14-year-old to come up with a stock portfolio for next year, 2025. She put it with the question in ChatGPT, and then she was asking me, what does Hubco do? And what do you think about PPL? Because these were the names that came up in her list on ChatGPT. So everybody's using it now, especially the young generation. So we can understand that this is just the beginning. So the need for nuclear has been created because of AI. That's worth keeping in mind as we move on. Take account of that. GPs. Seconds. Yes, thank you. In this slide, interesting because the emerging markets and they are the major source of demand growth in electricity as compared to developed markets. The reason being for the GDP growth are and obviously they are coming from a lower base, so the increase in demand for electricity growth will be faster. And on average, it's expected that it will be about 3.6%. This number seems small on an annual basis, but this is just the beginning and it's expected to rise much more. There is data available already in terms of forecast for the US, which is at the center of AI developments currently with all the NVIDIA and all based in the US. So this is just the beginning, but the interesting bit here is the change in the mix from between clean sources of energy and the dirty fuels that we talked about on the first slide. So you can see that in the bars at the lower chart where you see electricity generated by low emission sources and the fossil fuels, that most of the energy now, welcome sir, we were missing you, is coming from clean sources. And that's what is being steadfast because of the rise of AI. There is this greater demand for electricity, which is causing the shift. So the world is moving in the right direction. Money makes the world go round. So climate change couldn't really do what AI will now help achieve in terms of accelerating the growth of renewable sources of electricity. We can move on. I just introduced a couple of names, and these are just globally and companies which are beneficiaries of the kind of opportunities for investments which will come around. I haven't deliberately included any Pakistani companies here to make sure nobody's offended at being excluded. So these are just global companies, mainly Chinese, but the idea is to show that there are many beneficiaries. So any investment, in terms of investment opportunities, anything which is in the value chain for renewables is interesting. Anything which is in the value chain for nuclear now is interesting. And nuclear is a place where perhaps the growth can be more significant. The reason being that it's coming from a low base. So, and it's really difficult to find investment opportunities in the nuclear space because of ESG factors. Because the biggest issue we face is how will they treat wastage? How will labor be protected? So the ESG factors, which we've talked about in previous events, which have been arranged by the CFA Society, are very important when we look at nuclear-related companies because they're not as clean as solar or wind power companies are. But the issue is that the sun doesn't shine all the time, the wind doesn't blow all the time. So you need everything you can get in the clean energy space to meet the challenge that AI creates in terms of energy needs. And then the last one is the utility, which is an example only, just that anything to do with grid investments would obviously be an investment opportunity as well worth looking at, simply because a lot of investment will need to go in the grid to upgrade it to cope with the level of new energy that is coming to achieve that sort of scale. If you can move on, please. Thank you. So this chart is basically just showing us that because of this increasing demand for electricity from AI, where is it coming from? So when we think of AI, for AI, it's data processing, and data has to be processed, stored in data centers. So a lot of data centers are being springing up, especially in the United States by the tech giants. So Amazon has got many data centers announced. They're actually being fueled by nuclear power. The most recent deals, Microsoft has started this process of reactivating a nuclear power plant, which was the biggest source of nuclear disaster in the US. They have started planning to reactivate it. It will take years, but it will be live again. And then Google has announced 7 nuclear power plants, which will be up and running by 2035. So using nuclear power, there will be a lot of data centers that will be up and coming. And there are beneficiaries in the emerging markets as well. Malaysia is making a very good use of it. Because they see a lot of US companies coming and setting up data centers there because it's cheap and they are neutral. Singapore doesn't have capacity to host more data centers, so Malaysia gets them. So I wish we can also benefit in some way from this surge in demand for data centers globally, because we have abundance of land and all the resources here. And that would be perhaps something for our telcos to look at. But these are basically the reasons why AI is resulting in that increase in demand. This chart is showing us 3 lines. So what the idea here is to show what is the increase in demand likely. And this is only until 2026. So 2 years now. And the reason for that is that estimates are changing all the time, because we are discovering what AI is capable of and how fast it can grow. So the base case is currently that electricity usage in 2022 was 460,000 terawatt. What can it increase to by 2026? Base case, which is the middle line, shows that it will go up by 170%. The bear case is that it will go up by around 130%. And the bull case is that it can go up to 220%. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if we're standing here next year and this is being revised up to 400%, because that's usually how things scale up when they actually grow. So these are just very basic estimates just to give you a sense of scale in which we are expecting energy demand to grow. So even doubling is a big increase in 2 years' time in terms of energy demand needs. And how can we cope and how can we make sure that the energy transition is in the right direction? That is being made possible because of government policy, but also because this investment is for the future. So AI is not for the next 5 years or the next 50 years. We're already talking about human robots and whatnot. It's scary. So it is for the probably the rest of our lifetimes. And this is something that has to be planned out with. So this is an opportunity for government to rethink how to change the energy mix in the favor in a way that it would suit growing needs in future for electricity demand. And this is just the beginning in terms of estimates for how much demand can grow, and doubling is just the base case. If you can move on, please. We can skip that slide. Thank you. So these are just numbers which, and this adds up to 100%. So it's stating how energy is used by AI in each stage. So model development uses 10%, model training takes 30%, inference takes another 60%. But if you ask me for one key point from these bar charts, the message is that ChatGPT takes 30 times more energy than a normal Google search. So it's very much energy intensive. And we need to find as many ways as possible of using that energy efficiently, increasing the energy efficiency, and also improving the mix of that energy. So both have to go hand in hand. And this is a great investment opportunity. I think the biggest thematic opportunity of our lifetime as investors. and we all need to be aware of the changes that it can bring. For investors who would like to invest sustainably, this can create very exciting opportunities. If we can move on, please. So this is again showing the increase in power, data center power consumption, but I think we've made that point, so we can move on. These are some more companies. I like talking about companies. So some more companies, these are some of my favorite companies. So again, we component manufacturers, the reason I like them is they're cheaper than the big tech companies and they provide similar exposure. And then we talked about BYD already. We've got cattle here. So again, one of the Chinese giants responsible for energy storage. I'm sure there must be some examples which are in the making in Pakistan that have this kind of exposure. And then we have a telco, which is in Malaysia. We can move on, please. In the end, we started with where we are in terms of energy mix. Today, at the end of 2023, it's only 18% or so was clean energy. And this slide, I would like to leave you with the message that in terms of growth in electricity demand being fed, it is mainly coming through greater investment and greater share of clean energy sources. And so the world is moving in the right direction. And the rise of AI is leading to higher need for electricity, changes in energy mix faster than they would have happened without AI, just on the basis of climate change, because there's a need to expedite it, and that growth is coming in clean energy, mainly in emerging markets, but also in developed markets. So if you look at the percentages, for the change in the mix is quite meaningful, and I'll leave you to delve into the numbers. I don't think numbers matter, the direction matters more than the numbers. So there's a direction of travel. As for anyone who is interested in investing sustainably, the opportunity set is just increasing. And I think it's a much more interesting opportunity set that existed before AI was available, just because the universe is expanded. So I leave it there. I haven't touched upon the risks, but I'm hoping there will be some questions and then we can talk about it.
So thank you very much for that enlightening presentation. I would now like to request Mr. Kamran Kamal to please take the podium and share his thoughts about today's topic.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I think it's a very interesting topic. If you are looking at today's newspaper, any newspaper anywhere in the world, there are three topics which show up in. One is energy transition. Number two will be AI, and number three will be sustainability. And even on a sustainability financing or anything, you could be either for it or against it. If you're, recent election is like, any bellwether. So people were investing into it and now people are against it. So that is the conversation which will be happening in the decades to come as well. So, I think Mubashira has talked about AI and its impact and how energy intensive it is. I think it offers us an opportunity to look at how the technology, the energy, and the investment are coming together. Because earlier we talked about energy in a completely different context, that there will be utilities and it will be a separate infrastructure investment class. And then AI or the technology related investment will be separate and financing will be either of the two. But now we are seeing that these things are actually moving. So next slide. But just basically what impact the AI has had onto the energy, right? So I think one number here is 1,000 terawatt hours. Just to put it in context, it is 10 times what the annual consumption of Pakistan is. And this is going to grow. And as Mubashira referred, that there has been a flat line in the advanced economies for the demand of electricity. Now they're growing about 2% on a very large base. In a country like Pakistan and others, it could be actually 5 to 10% as well, because we are slower in adoption of technology. And I think it is the demand growth is going to be about 160% year on year. I'll come into next part that, there will be something. This is the next. We look at what is going to be the energy demand under the large economies. So China is going to need about 300 terawatt hours, then 250 just in the US. And we've talked about that the stagnant sector of nuclear has been, given a new life. And EU will be about 200 or 250. The interesting part is that some of the smaller economies, if you look on the right-hand side of the chart, the percentage of electricity demand in Ireland and Denmark is much more than, you see in China or US or EU. And that is why people are going to Denmark, why people are going to Ireland. It's only for two reasons. One, they are colder climate countries and they have abundant renewable energy sources. We have both and there's a demand growth. It should be a conversation in Pakistan as well that this is an opportunity that we really need to look at. We have abundant renewable energy, all sorts. May that be nuclear, hydro, wind, solar. We have, I think we need a demand growth desperately at this point in time because we have excess capacity. And some of these countries are struggling to actually catch up with this. So that is why this has become such an important topic in energy transition, because this demand has to be fulfilled by the renewable energy, not by the traditional fuels or the fossil fuels, which I wouldn't call dirty fuels, but I think it's a base load and it's a way of looking at it. Being from UPCO, you will have to say that these are the necessity of life. So, next slide. The AI has high energy requirement because, so the difference we talk about why Google search is so energy light and why this chat GPT. So earlier we could only do what was digitally textualized, right? So you will have a data which is stored in a form of a binary as a computer system storage. But now this chat GPT can scan and there's a Python which will look at images, which will draw inferences, and they have to convert all of that. And then these models have been trained on the large language models, which have been repository of terabits of data over data. So they have to go back and, whatever is new has been added. And this is graphic processing units rather than a normal unit. That's why you see that NVIDIA was a graphic processor, right? So they were the graphic card manufacturers and all of that. And now there has been a use of that. And that's why it is more energy intensive. And the appetite is unbelievable because it has also become a new arms race between nations. If you look at it, that whoever is going to have the dominance in AI is going to be leading the next era of industrialization, whichever you call it, the fifth industrialization wave, because China is also working on it. Europe is also working onto it. America is also working onto it. It's very similar to what we've seen in the past. So may that be a diesel engine, may that be a search engine like Google, because there were multiple companies competing to be, even within America, you will see there's a Google, Microsoft has partnered with OpenAI and Facebook is using its own. Even Twitter has joined in the race. So it is actually between the private sector in America and between America and the East, there's also a competition. So recently, the other thing that the people are not only working on which model is better, but people are also working on which model is more energy efficient. So recently there was a news about DeepSeek, which was spun off by one of the Chinese companies, which claims to use, I think, 1/3 the energy which any other chat GPT uses. So I hope that there is going to be an efficiency part in there as well. So I think I wouldn't say that there will be an exponential demand for energy, but there will be, I think, efficiency in the energy consumption. The models will become more sophisticated as it has happened in any other domain as well. The other part is that their reliance onto the renewable energy is the key part as well. But I think one thing that we don't talk about, I think we talk about in Pakistan, you will hear in the energy markets, north-south transmission constraint. Data centers has made it miserable for America. So there are challenges onto the grid where they are struggling because everybody wants to put up a data center in California or New York or on the East Coast or in the South. But now the utilities are coming and saying, okay, you know what? We are not going to allow you to put a data center and create a congestion, which leads to a lot higher energy tariffs for the consumers as well, because there's a congestion charge. So they're saying if you need a data center to be placed, you actually have to put it in Ohio, maybe put it in Kentucky, where we have excessive. And because I think a lot of these renewable energy sources are not located closer to the urban centers. Usually the generation centers are in Pakistan as well. Multan and Muzaffargarh area for the longest time had a lot of power plants. Hub in Balochistan has a lot of power plants, Port Qasim, and in the north as well. So, they are not necessarily closer to the urban centers, and earlier growth of the data centers was closer to the the urban centers because it was easier. Northern Virginia has about 20% of the data centers in America, right? Because that was the need, because the DARPA and all those people were storing that data. But now it's going actually further, which is a good way for us as well, because earlier you will have to do cloud, now it has to disperse. It cannot be concentrated in America because the cables and all of those things. So it is now going around in the world as well. People are going into Asia. Dubai is putting up data centers. Saudi Arabia is looking at it. Malaysia, we just heard China is doing it. So there is an opportunity for us. So I have to think about what it can result for Pakistan. That's what we have to think about, and so that we can be lockstep with the development in the world as well. So next slide. I've talked about it. I mean, I think I'll just say that all the four rising energy sources we have abundant. And to be very honest, until very recently, we failed to harness them as well. So solar revolution that Pakistan has seen has been a private sector revolution. No single power plant at a competitive price came through the public model that has happened. So rooftop solar is a prime example. I think there are areas in Pakistan which are available, which we need to look at. Nuclear, again, we have abundant nuclear power as well. We have 2,200 megawatts in the south. We have 1,450, and there's another 1,200 megawatts coming up. I think the challenge that West has versus us is the siting challenge. Because yes, the 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl or Fukushima, they were big disasters. Nothing to take away from it. But let me put this thought that there have been more airline crashes, there have been more lives lost, and there have been as more impact and a lot of other human errors. These things, I think the number of accidents in nuclear have been a lot less. Yes, the impact has been huge, but the impact in terms of financial or the human lives has been a lot less. Yes, it is a high risky, but it also has a much higher, I would say, safety protocols as well. So it also, in countries like Pakistan, where we have a good track record, and it's done in a very, very, secure way, maybe it's something for us to look at as well going forward as a nuclear. Hydro, we've talked about. I think we have harnessed a significant, but solar and wind in Balochistan, in south of Sindh, and middle of Pakistan, where in the Bhakkar, Layya, and the neighboring areas around Indus, there's a lot of potential. I don't think we need to have a centralized planning for it. There could be an opportunity for making these available for the data centers as well. Next slide. Again, I think just like AI is having an impact onto all the domains, may that be manufacturing, may that be health sciences, may that be technology or computing and everything, it is also impacting the energy sector as well. So it will make the intermittency of renewable energy better. It can predict, weather models can help when we will have power, when we do need to use storage or alternative sources of power to make sure that there is a base load available. You can have a predictive analysis and a predictive maintenance, which has been used by many power plants in Pakistan as well, and it is going to continuously help that as well. I think it is going to allow us to develop power grids in a more, efficient manner. Earlier, we've been doing it based on whatever the knowledge is available with the experts that you use. But this, I think people are using it, just like health sciences now. I was recently with a friend of mine. He said, all these medical conferences where the new things are being talked about, a doctor cannot attend. So for them, there are models now being made that they can just pick up the key areas and make a summary for them and present them. So I think we will benefit what the rest of the world in the power sector or the power grids have done, so we can plan that better. So it's going to be a feedback loop, if you were to talk about that. We are going to provide the energy and they're going to provide back the feedback in terms of how to improve your energy systems in general, not only in terms of power generation, in terms of the power grid, in terms of consumption, what you need to do. So these are the things that is also beneficial. AI is beneficial, and a lot of companies are investing in it. Next slide. I think, again, I talked about it, that where do you do the siting of it, the load center, and all these things are important. You need to do these. I think data centers in terms of the world, they are looking for the cooler climates at this point in time. But I think there are solutions which are coming, which is that now they actually cool it with the liquid nitrogen. So as they talk about it, all these GPUs or the racks have 3 pipes. One is for energy, one is for data, and the third one is for cooling, right? So they only have 3 nodes. You wouldn't know which data has come from where, because it is. So they are working onto it. So the siting will become better. In terms of right now, they prefer the cooler countries and the environments, but I think sooner enough we will see it, the climate resilient in a hot weather, there will be data centers as well. So the next slide. That's again, the sustainable infrastructure investment. There are multiple forms, there are multiple things that are happening. A lot of multilaterals came up with the idea of a green bonds that they wanted to encourage people to invest into it. I think AI and its energy transition need has made it possible for all the financial institutions not to look for specialized version or specialized financing instruments only. Earlier, you had to encourage it, but now there's a demand of infrastructure for data centers and AI related and energy transition. Solar and wind is required because you don't want to make the things worse for climate change, right? So there is actual opportunity now. So I think that the green bonds are great, but I think the opportunity is so huge as we look forward that I don't see that we will need. But impact assessment is very critical, right? So you don't want to put up a data center based on coal-fired power plants. I mean, that's not what the impact is. Yes, if there is already an installed capacity like Pakistan, yes, it may make sense because you're not going to pollute any further. That coal is going to be there for 20 years, 25 years, and our impact is a lot less. So those are the kind of things. And then the sustainability linked loans as well. They were earlier very popular. So this is more of a snapshot of what was happening. Still, I think multilaterals today are actually promoting these kind of things. But you will see that one challenge we will see much more, I think, amplified is whether you want to sponsor a certain technology or not, right? So like the batteries, they are not making their way to America and the West. And the battery technology, whether we like it or not, China is way advanced of others, right? And if you're going to use renewable energy for your data centers, if you're not going to use fossil fuels, you will have to rely onto the battery storage because otherwise there's no way that you can have a 24 hours base load without either and the nuclear, yes, it has a promise, but it has a long way to go. One, the development cycle is 7 to 10 years. And either way, you will have to work with the battery storage solutions which are coming out of China. So those are the things that next slide. These are some of the companies which are investing, right? So, I mean, Mubashira showed a few. Every financial institutions, although they follow the American policy these days, they're walking away now. The new word is green lashing in order to be closer to the White House, but it was a green investing a few years ago. So these are some of the companies which are looking at the energy mix in terms of there are data center companies, there are investment companies, the BlackRocks of the world, the Blackstones of the world. They have a dedicated investment opportunities or the funds that are actively looking at it. They are facilitating energy transition projects. And if there is an off-taker in terms of the data center, and there are data center companies, as you see, that Germany has like 2,000 data centers. America has several thousand data centers. And Pakistan, unfortunately, has a much smaller solutions, which are, I think, maybe not, I don't think anybody has a co-location, maybe one or two, but they're, yeah, Jazz or...
How can NVIDIA buying shares of on the stock exchange from inside? From inside trading, they are investing.
They are investing?
Yeah.
Okay. But I'm just saying that, globally there are people, and there's also a talk about, you will see ArcelorMittal here because there's a green steel, green aluminum. There is an industrials who are looking at how to reduce their, either their carbon footprint to look at the technology advancement or use some of their energy through the other, sources. So there have been projects of green hydrogen as well because steel making relies on hydrogen a lot or onto the coal-fired coking ovens. So these are some of the things that, if you look at what is going to be the landscape, I think there will be companies which will be part of the technological revolution. So they may be a tech company, there may be a utility, there may be a storage solution company or a financial institution. So all of them will have, and we do know that the direction, as we look at the direction, things are going to change. It's going to get more automated. Yes, the human requirement will be there in different form because as the Google search came, everybody could type their own, the typewriter went out of business, but there were new jobs which were created. The same thing goes for the camera manufacturer. Everybody has a camera in their pocket now. but that doesn't mean that the photography or the media business went out of business, right? So there are new jobs being created. There's a social media related. I mean, a lot of new jobs have been created, although publishing has taken a backseat, but it has taken maybe a new form as well. So same thing goes for AI, the energy, because some years ago, people thought that the utilities business is just a fixed return, 6 to 8% margin business. But today, if you look at over the last 1 year performance of the utilities in the West as well, they've been performing really well because they got an opportunity to clean their act, invest in the future technology in terms of the renewable energy, and the nuclear is also getting a new lease of life through the small modular reactors. There's a fusion which is being worked on. I think it will be a blend of all 4 technologies that will help us with the storage, which will help us go into the new energy sources as well. So thank you very much. If anybody has questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Kamran, for that wonderful presentation. After listening to the first 2 presentations, I'm just wondering if in the race for AI dominance, we have actually put the climate change objectives on the backseat or not. But we'll discuss that in the Q&A session. And before we reach to that point, I would like to request Mr. Farrukh Sabzwari to either come to the podium or while keep sitting, share his thoughts about current topic.
I'll keep sitting. I don't have a presentation. For a very opportune topic, I was in Lahore and used the Lahore bus station to come here. I purposely say bus station. So we talk about artificial intelligence and human intelligence is where we have gaps, some serious gaps at the Lahore airport, I can tell you. Now, whether it's PIA or it's the airport itself, but thank God there is talk of privatization. They can clearly not manage it. So handicapped passengers entering aircraft after it's full does not make sense. So clearly very little thinking going on. You mentioned, firstly, thank you, CFA Society. You've helped the PSX quite a bit over the last few years on upping our ante on ESG and sustainability. Task force set up. We've had a primer, also guidelines released. There's clearly a lot of advocacy that we need to do at the PSX to help companies understand why this is important. So remember, this is like maybe a couple of years. This is my introduction to ESG, which was a couple of years ago when a client came calling and said, have you looked at the score that Lucky Cement is getting on Bloomberg? And I was like, I've never noticed. And so the suggestion was, it's really good to see that Pakistan has companies which are being ranked on ESG. So I was going to ask Mubashira whether that's a question that ever comes to her, because she's in the investment management business, whether Pakistani companies ever figure from an ESG perspective, but we'll discuss that after I'm done. So that was good to know that people like Lucky Cement are conscious or have to be, and all companies. So here's the advocacy part that PSX needs to do going forward, that there is no future minus sustainability. There has to be focus. So whether it's suppliers, whoever you partner with, they all have to be compliant. I think it's one of those things that require a lot of hand-holding for companies to understand. There was some talk of, so we were in China, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and visited a data center. So you talked about energy requirement. We were just appalled at the size of the generators outside the facility. You'll be also surprised in Pakistan, a lot of people, when I was CDC chairman, would call me and say, do you require, because I was also on the board of a digital bank. The discussion was data centers. Can we do a better job at it? I've got real estate pockets in different areas in Pakistan. So I'd like to be in this business. And I've had 2 people actually have a serious conversation around it. So clearly people are thinking data center business. And yes, there are, I think from an international standard perspective, there are clearly some missing links from what you get in terms of providers today on data. Some facts and figures. 2:1 is the ratio of clean energy investments globally, now outspacing investments in fossil fuels, something Mubashira picked up on. Carbon footprints will be clearly a huge challenge, again, something she spoke about. Renewable energy, Kamran Saab mentioned here, Pakistan has some of the highest solar radiation levels in the world. Again, I didn't know that, but now I do. And a lot of research will tell you. So yesterday we, I think, picked up on, so there's a conference in Lahore, which is why a few of us had to use the bus station to come here in the afternoon. But one of the topics we discussed was what are the themes going forward? We didn't touch on AI that much, but it is clearly one theme that stood out. And so did clean energy, and so did globalization. But I think it was an interesting comment yesterday. I just thought I'd mention it here as well, because we're all quasi investment banking business or the investment management business. It's no longer going to be globalization that's going to be important, but specialized sort of entities or regionalization is really going to be key. And I think the bottom line from Dr. Salman, who is the strategist for Fidelity, they manage $1 trillion. So I don't want to belittle Aberdeen when I say this, but so he mentioned that if barriers are here to stay, which is what Trump is talking about, trade barriers, then really the future is, when you talk about globalization, it has to be from Pakistan's perspective as well. You need to think regional specialization or regional entities or alliances is what the future will be. So his worry was whether we're actually thinking along those lines or not. PSX, somebody mentioned green sukuk. So there is, green sukuk is something that is being worked on. So I have to admit, I'm seeing some forward thinking being done within the ministry, especially finance. And I think if you've looked at Quran, which was also some forward thinking, at least from a strategy perspective, in Pakistan, we kind of live by the day. And so it's nice to see at least somebody talking about what a 3, 5, 7-year strategy should look like and what you should be focusing on. AI is in there in pockets, but I also wonder the biggest cost will be job losses. I don't know what that future holds for globally, because as per research, it's 300 million jobs that will be lost by AI over the next 5, 7, whatever years. Those are really my overarching thoughts. I just, we'd rather open the floor, make this, even though it's not a roundtable, but yeah, make this a roundtable discussion. Is there any questions for me or for other panelists? We can open the floor.
I'll just say it for this. AI के context में you mentioned Texas being one of the leaders in blockchain computation, AI, and high performance computing data centers. And you can look up the grid live. You go to ERCOT dashboard through VPN, you can look at the live grid. And you will come to the conclusion that 70%, 65 to 70% of Texas is still powered with oil and gas and fossil fuels, coal and oil and gas. Or they have nuclear, they have wind, they have solar, and they have I think they have 100 gigawatts grid, and they'll go to 150 gigawatts in the next few years. And I since I've lived there, I know the Texas thinking like the back of my hand. I'm telling you, it has very little to do with renewables. It all has to do with the cost. Some of the largest data centers are coal powered, and they are getting powered at 2.6 cents. You can't beat that with solar or wind or maybe nuclear. and so on and so forth. So I think we need to be, when it comes to data centers, chahe wo HPC ho, AI ho, number data centers ho, we really need to look at the cost of the power. This temperature thing, since I run one, is secondary. It's 5 to 10% of the cost. 90% of the cost is power. Land is meaningless. Land की भी जो सारी बातें हैं वो भी meaningless हैं, worthless हैं actually. Temperature की भी सारी बातें worthless and meaningless हैं. It will all come down to the cost of power. If it's third core, so be it. Screw all this renewable. It doesn't really matter. Because you know what? They need base load. ये जो intermittency है renewables की, ये इतनी आसान नहीं है इसको manage करना. You need base load, and maybe you can add on some renewables like solar and wind to reduce your cost. If it reduces your cost, nobody is going to come to your data center if it's more costly than these other data centers. And if you're competing in the global market, it will all come down to the computation cost.
I understand your point in terms of, I know that the Texas obviously is big on fossil fuels, but the idea is that if Microsoft will go and, reactivate 3 Mile Island nuclear reactor, which is going to require a lot of it, it was actually shut down 5 years ago because of the cost. They couldn't compete on the cost. So the pressures in the West, yes, in the Trump era may not be there, but in the long term, you cannot allow all this new energy need. So right now, yes, Texas had this excess capacity because all these grids were not operating at 80% load factor, which was the case in Pakistan 10 years ago. All the thermal power plants were operating at 80% load factor. Today, they operate at low 30s, right? So we have that capacity today. But if you're going to continue this growth path, the world is not going to allow you to put more coal-fired power plants. Even China today has decided and committed to the world that they will not finance any coal-fired power plant outside its bounds, right? So as we are talking about the future, we do have to think about the future. Now, coming back to the cost, right? Yes, I think there is an element of cost which should be available. But if I were to say in Pakistan, for you to be getting a tariff of 3 cents or below, you will only get it into an intermittent pattern. You cannot expect the state to subsidize you just because one business requires it, right? Yes, the cost of power at this point in time is high. This can be reduced. This can be in single-digit cents. 20 रुपए से 30 रुपए के दरमियान कहीं आ जाएगी. अगर हम उसको यूनिफॉर्म टैरिफ खत्म कर दें, तो शायद कुछ एरियाज में 20 रुपए की भी हो जाए. But if you are going to expect that, we are going to get it for 10 रुपए या 6 रुपए, that is not going to happen. So that's 3 cents, right? 9 rupees is 3 cents. But going forward, we do have a lot of solar, and the recent tariffs are close to 3 cents per kilowatt hour on an annualized basis. But for that, you will need an energy storage solution. And the grid can provide you that. So the blended could be 5 to 6 cents. That's
Yeah, debate, we can take it offline.
yeah.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you for the presentations. I have 3 questions. Mubashira, first, in the value chain which you talked about, where do you see the most attractive investment opportunities? Is it with the utilities? Is it with storage, the data centers, the grid? So that's question number 1. Second, where is the innovation coming from? Is it being led by large utility companies? Is it being driven by technology companies? So where is this research or innovation coming from? And the third question for Kamal Saab, and both for you and Mubashira and Kamal Saab, is that in Pakistan, we have seen HUBCO expanding beyond just being a utility and going into EVs. And so are there other examples of, is that what other EM utility companies doing? Are there other EM utility companies who are doing the same thing, i.e. moving in the value chain towards becoming more smart energy companies, or is this a rare example? Thank you.
So starting with the value chain opportunities, Ali has a history of asking tough questions without warning. But I would say I'm a bit biased. And The reason for that is in energy storage, it's dominated by China. And the issue with Chinese companies as an investor, you're looking for returns. And the issue with China is the lack of clarity on policy. And the Chinese companies struggle because they are facing geopolitical issues. There are some markets which are close to them. One way that they are coming around those issues is by locating production sites elsewhere. So, for instance, BYD might be producing EVs in future, inshallah, in Pakistan to sell to the rest of the world because they can't sell directly without having tariffs based on them. So, value chain companies are mostly in China for solar, wind. I do like them, but they wouldn't be my top pick as an investment idea. My top pick would probably be in the data center space, which is non-Chinese, but Asian companies in Malaysia, which are still cheap and which will see faster growth and are benefiting from some of the similar growth angles. So demand growth for their services. Because it's early days and there's more growth, there's no geopolitical tension. So Telecom Malaysia was one of the examples on the slides that I shared. Besides that, in terms of innovation, the Taiwanese value chain is really impressive because it's all basically they can't do NVIDIA without the Taiwanese AI chain. And that's because the semiconductor chips, all the way to everything that to do with liquid cooling that Kamran mentioned, is produced in Taiwan. So that's, I believe, is where the innovation is coming. And that is what will allow NVIDIA to grow in future. So that would be the area I would look for innovation. And then on smart energy, I would love to hear what Pakistan is doing.
See, I think if you look at how the utility, you have to look from a utility or a power sector company, what are the opportunities? So either as a power generator, you could go into the distribution company or look at what the changes are going to happen. If you were to think that we talk about intermittency, if the energy could be stored, the grid will have a very different configuration. And you see this today as well, that after the net metering, the power generators are suffering because consumer has become a seller as well, right? I mean, for an arbitrage opportunity. So just imagine now that there is so much prevalence of rooftop solar. If the battery storage became really cheap and you were to say, either you provide me for free or I'm not going to take it, probably the consumer is going to go towards having his own storage, a smaller storage like the UPS that they had, right? So that could change the way the grid were structured 5 years ago or the way we saw them 5 years ago. I'm a big fan of the storage technology. I think the BYD's success is one, I would say, use case of the storage. Because what they have done in the car, if you look at it, they've just replaced the engine, right? And that's the battery. The motor management software or the battery management software and the kinetics are all the same. The shape of the car hasn't changed. The seats that you sit in, the ADAS hasn't changed. The only thing that has changed is this. Now it's going to have an impact onto the grids much larger than what we see in the mobility sector. So I think I personally am biased for maybe working with them that, the rest of the world is objecting to the advancement of technology by the Chinese because we are all having difficulty accepting that there is a nation which was a follower, which has become a leader. And it'll only be years later that we will realize that opposing them wouldn't help. Because 2 years ago, I used to have an argument with Asif. He would say, sodium ion will come in, solid state will come in. You go and visit CATL, you go visit BYD, I visited some of them, you visit Goshen. They spend $200 million in research. They see something into it, right? And that's why we would see this, that they will be the market leaders in it. And sooner or later, there is some sort of an arrangement between the West and the East. The world will benefit from it. I think these raising of walls that the batteries cannot make its way to Europe, the batteries cannot make its way to US. And in the meantime, no technology company in the West has been able to match the progress is actually keeping West poorer. It's rare to talk about it, but I think we really need to accept that Chinese have spent some top dollars, just like the research institutes in America did this post-World War II. I think there is a time when they will. So I think the battery technology in one way or the shape. Number two, I think China is realizing that they will have to diversify their supplier base. So their presence in Brazil, several countries, their presence in Hungary, the CATL is there, BYD is there, their presence in Mexico, their presence in some fringe EU states is actually an innovation. So solar panels, they had set up the factories in Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam before America raised the tariffs. So they're moving to Indonesia. Can Pakistan be in Indonesia where we can balance the China and America? I think it's up to us how we actually take advantage of it, which Farrukh Sab talked about regionalization. I think we haven't done a great job, but there is an opportunity for us as well to do that part. I think that's how I see it. And for a company like Hubco, going into EV is only one step that, yes, this is going to be e-mobility, but there will be other opportunities, I think bigger opportunities, which other companies will also be looking at. We are not the only one. Many other are looking at it. So there will be a lot of opportunities there. Thank you.
Mubashira, you talked about nuclear power and the opportunity there. So do you think that, or do you know there's a trend now that small modular reactor technology, which is like used for new scale, is it picking up in different markets, or do you see an opportunity for that to grow?
Certainly, because nuclear power plants, as we've spoken before, take time to come online, 7 to 10 years, and there's a bit more uncertainty associated with it. There are also ESG hurdles to cross. So globally, because ESG is part of the investment process, it has to meet a certain standard of rating. It's still difficult to invest in them. So then it's easier to invest in a company, a Korean company, like I'm just throwing names into Samsung, which makes those small, medium reactors because they are equally in demand and the use case is more proven. And you're not getting all your money on one plant coming up in 10 years' time. But they are increasing opportunities. Indian companies are actually doing quite a lot in terms of increasing nuclear. And I will always tell my colleagues they're very good at marketing because they come in to tell you exactly what you want to hear. So that's what that's been the entire speech over the last couple of months, that, we're investing in hydro, investing in nuclear. So look at our mix in 2035, and the numbers will go from 10% to 15%, 2035, 10 years later. But it all looks good because it's a direction of travel. A change can't happen overnight, but the mix will change over time. But one thing which we have seen, for instance, I'm drifting away a bit from the topic, but one thing just to give a bit of change, we've seen with the international the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, they started with zero solar panel capacity, and now they have enough solar panel manufacturing capacity in the US to meet local demand, because obviously they threw a lot of money at it, and they've got enough local manufacturing capacity. Those solar panels are much more expensive for the locals to buy, but then they again have subsidies to incentivize use of local content. So it's a whole value chain where the government is playing a key role. But I do feel that cost is a big factor. I think another big factor is investor demand. So if it's listed companies who are using power or data centers, they will be asked by their investors to provide statistics on how much of their power is renewable and how. So the incentive might be just to, sort of meet certain requirements being asked for by investors. It may not be, love for greenery, clean environment, but it would be actually economics which will come. And I think the real reason why we've seen that huge increase in demand for EVs, say Chinese EVs, is because the cost is so low. BYD in China is, even if they increase the price by 100%, it will still be cheaper than a EU-made EV. So it's all that. And there are small and medium is definitely the place to look for initially in those big plants, where the ESG factors are a big question mark. So I think those are the first places to look at.
Thank you.
Mubashira, just a follow-up on this requirement of the data center with one green energy. Is it just an ESG requirement to satisfy investors, or is there a legal implication on that? For example, if in Europe or whatever, you cannot do anything else except it.
So in certain markets, EU is the most advanced in terms of having legal requirements. Even in China, there are now legal requirements that your carbon emissions can't be above a certain level. So it depends on market to market. Those legal requirements are also being placed to meet climate objectives which have been set by the government. So there is an interlinkage. And why does the government want to achieve it? Because at the end of the day, they also want their companies to be global companies. And so I think investors then play a role as well. So it's all interlinked, but it is definitely the legal requirements are there, being coming in place because of the climate objectives that countries have set. And actually, China has been pushing forward. So just a small example, in the solar value chain, polysilicon is the part of the solar value chain which uses the most energy. And China has been, the champion, lowest cost polysilicon. Nobody wants that polysilicon because it's produced in Xinjiang where there are labor issues. But they were benefiting because they use a coal and they would have this cheap coal. Now in new locations, they're not being given that subsidy by the government. So the government has just stopped that facility. So you see the cost of production of polysilicon also go up in China. So there has to be political will behind it. It can't be just investors. It is a hand in hand sort of, both working together sort of situation.
But it has to be a mixture, right? Because it's not 24/7, 365, at least in terms of competitiveness. You could have it, but it will be very expensive. So it will be a mix. There will be some thermal component to it.
Absolutely. So it would be the new plants which won't have it, but the old plants would still have it. So they can manage. So it's we change the new capacity rather than having to replace the existing old capacity. That's why it's the direction of travel, I say. Yeah. But what investors, I think, want to look at, and trying to answer the question that Farrukh asked on the Lucky 7 ESG rating as well, is just we want awareness. So, and when we're looking at Pakistani companies as well, it's in comparison with regional players. And some of our regional players are very good at having all the numbers on hand. And that's because they have access to that one-day investor. They're more used to talking to investors. So even before you ask them, they'll give you so many numbers you can't write them down. So that's so good. It's a bit irritating at times because you feel how how much better they're doing at it. But anyway, the point being that there's MSCI or other rating companies that we use for ESG rating also look at your size as a company to rate you. So that's where some of us struggle because most of our companies are small cap. They're not above that 2.5 billion. But the benefit is that if the companies work with them, MSCI approach them, they're willing to have a look at it. And the more foreign ownership you have, the more there is a chance of MSCI giving you an ESG rating. And in any case, the Fidelities of the world, and everybody would have local teams to assess the ESG rating of each company. So everybody used to run a frontier market fund.
Yeah.
We don't have it anymore, but we used to do the ESG rating of each company.
Yeah.
And that's how we were able to invest in them. And some of the companies have been very forthcoming in providing information, but it's more a matter of asking. It should become a matter of just practice. I just have that information readily available, rather than investors having to ask for it, because it's not usually the case that everybody would bother asking for it. They would just overlook. So
I have a question. Yeah, from your perspective, and as you said, you look at Pakistan's companies and some are reporting and some aren't. From our end, what we done was reach out to Refinitiv and we introduced their scoring tool to our listed companies. And we are encouraging a lot of reporting from them. So when they start talking about it and go and use that portal and do their scoring, so automatically our companies become visible on Refinitiv. So from your side, which is a better and are these all Refinitiv, MSCI, are these all interconnected in some way? Do they follow a similar pattern or each has their own way of rating? And from an investment perspective, which has a more strong, credibility?
Sure. So all of these rating agencies, Sustainalytics or MSCI, which are most widely used, they only rate the companies once a year. So you have to wait for your annual rating to be upgraded. And it's one analyst who is doing the rating. If he doesn't understand something, they usually don't make the effort to follow up with the companies. They haven't received a reply. They would just put it as no information. So then the MSCI is the best one, I would say, because it's most widely followed, along with Sustainalytics as a second one. But it helps if the companies are in contact with them and trying to improve their rating. Trying to provide that information that how can they get a good rating rather than, being on the receiving end. That okay, we'll answer when they ask us in a year's time. That then definitely helps. What sometimes investors do, obviously we want our fund rating to be good. and we have a positive view on a company's rating, we've invested in them, then we will ask MSCI to speak to them. We will make sure the company pays talk. Because it's also in our interest that the rating goes up. It means the fund rating will go up as well. So it all helps, but the company has to be very much interested. They can't wait to be asked. They have to be ready.
Okay. One more question, linked to it.
Sure.
Recently, SECP, along with the market participants, has initiated the ESG Sustain. And that portal will now is introduced to listed corporates, and they will be putting in their scores on that. Now, do you think that will have a certain credibility, or will ESG Sustain need to maybe connect with any of the larger multinational platforms?
So if ESG Sustain, I'm not aware about the details, but if it's a local system, then it would need to be for global investors, it would need to have some kind of a connection with the local investors, because otherwise they might take it with a pinch of salt, the local ratings, and may not even consider them, because they would first do our own work if it's a big house. Otherwise, they would want an independent view on ESG rather than the company's own view or a local body's view. Because of also the purpose of comparability with other regional pairs and other companies in the portfolio.
I'll just add on exactly this point that Saudi, for example, Saudi has a body called FII, which is their equivalent of World Economic Forum. And FII believe that the rating agency, global ones, are not doing a fair job at rating EM countries. So they came up with their own framework. But they have applied that framework to a lot of emerging markets, not just to Saudi companies, because of that thing that you have to compare it with others. Having said that, their FII is trying to get adoption of their rating, but I don't think that people are taking it as a pinch of salt, because they think Saudis have just jigged it to make it more favorable towards their own, athletes.
So then we need to see how that Sustain can actually connect with international bodies and get some kind of.
Did I hear you correctly? Aberdeen doesn't have a frontier umbrella anymore? No, right? When do you think people start looking frontier again? And it's I know it's a difficult question because everybody's talking about a stronger dollar, weaker EM currencies, etc. So it's going to be a difficult pitch.
Yeah.
Still.
So it was performance matters, and the problem with frontier markets is that Pakistan, despite having all these opportunities because of the size of companies and liquidity and all of that, was stuck in the frontier market club.
Yes.
Which was a shame, because then that means we clubbed with Egypt and Nigeria and all of these currencies which hardly work in your favor. So the companies might be amazing, but the returns at the end of the day in US dollar are not fantastic. So we got a lot of fingers burnt.
Yeah.
I can't think of any big global fund house which has a successful track record in frontier funds. So I think it could be difficult, but memory is short for investors.
So that's the best news.
That's the best news for us. Hopefully we will move into EM and emerging. So Pakistan was the best stock market globally last year. That's a great place to start. Once the market starts performing, you definitely want to look at it. So let's keep the performance going, inshallah. I think then.
So my question is for the panel is that how do you see AI solutions helping to bridge the investment gap in clean energy infrastructure in Pakistan?
That's a good question. I'll just take first. So I think Pakistan is struggling with the demand challenge. I mean, all the talk about excess capacity and all of that is based on the projections that we did in 2015 to 2017 timeframe, that we will be growing at 5 to 6%, and our demand will be close to 140 to 150 gigawatt hours. Unfortunately, it went down to 106 gigawatt hours. It's a huge number, 50% less than what we were anticipating today. So this AI and data center and all sorts of these things, they will pick up, but unfortunately, we are not as Mubashira is talking about, we don't have a great track record in terms of the connectivity, in terms of freedom of data coming in and going out. And the last 1 year, while stock exchange has performed well, our track record on the data security has not been the greatest, right? So investors wouldn't mind if you were to locate your data centers here for the AI processing and you could offer them the incentive, but they would want that the governance system is robust enough that the data is available at all times, right? So that's one of the things, because there are three components. You need to have a data connectivity at all times. You need to have backup power, even a second backup and a third backup. So they work on 3 or 4 backups, the data centers. They cannot afford to be off. And if the data is actually the challenge, I think the conversation is going to start on the energy part. So that's the second thing. And I think the other opportunity is that, which again I said that Pakistan might be with the rest is moving towards these technologies. No, a lot of these people want to clean their manufacturing bases. And Pakistan has a lot of energy, so we could actually benefit not from technology here, but elsewhere. Because now China is focusing on to the advanced technology. They don't want to do these base load industries, which are steel manufacturing, aluminum smelters, the EV cell manufacturing. They want to outsource these to those countries which are on a low economic growth. I mean, in terms of the industrialization, or in terms of the percentage, but the industrialization. I think that's an opportunity we might have that we can move.
I have a question. I'm a lawyer from Islamabad, so helping the ministry develop the Article 6 framework for authorized credits. Unfortunately, the ticket size of financing and the project pipeline is abysmally low. It's also abysmally low compared to the exposure and the risk the country faces as a whole. So I just wanted to pick your, the whole panel on, what are the gaps that we're facing in attracting quality climate financing, in the private sector as well as, in other investment sectors. The general question.
And just briefly, for all the renewable energy projects, I think the climate funds or the multilaterals are investing. So,
but that facility is closed, right? So what about the EV? So I mean, is it a regulatory lack of readiness? So if State Bank announces more schemes on the EV end or on cooking stoves end or the afforestation end, would that help? What's the missing formula?
I think they're not. People aren't. I mean, just because of the last couple of years, people were not looking at investing in general or coming up with the projects and that's the thing. But renewable energy is attractive. But yes, there are other opportunities which it's lack of opportunity at this time or the availability. So people haven't developed any of those climate resilient solutions other than maybe this blue carbon project and some renewable energy projects. We don't hear any other projects attracting climate focused funds, right? So I think it is also on the entrepreneurs to come up with those projects, and only then we would know. So
more conversation, more.
Yeah, and I think the regulatory framework isn't there. You will be able to comment on to that. There is no clarity what kind of a regulatory framework exists as well. So as PSX and SECP has just come up with the ESG guidelines, more work needs to be developed for people to have a credibility thing as well.
Yeah, and then we are back from abnormal times and nearly defaulting as a country, etc. So the investment theme is clearly a bit of a missing theme, or was, and now people play catch up. I think probably a better conversation to have now versus what you may have seen. Probably more palatable to investors as well versus previous.
Is that all?
Yeah.
Questions? Okay, so on behalf of CFA Society Pakistan, I would like to thank all the speakers and a big thank you to Farrukh Sabzwari for supporting us and Raida for BS6 for joining holding this seminar for us. Asif Sir had to rush, so I'd request the panelists to please come here for the flags, and I'd request Raheel Sir to please being close to the energy sector be part of this flag giving efforts. I think we maybe all of you. So anything, it's a joint event, so you can jointly give it to
Oh, so I can jointly give it.
give it to Mubashira, yes. And Raita, please join us. Join us. And now to Kamran Kamal, please.
Otherwise,
Maybe you saw
Hi.
faces.
Do you want
I'll
to
be
come
there.
closer to him or?
No, it's fine.
रोहित साहब आप आ जाएं तो आप भी
आप अगर साथ
Yes. Yes.
and thank you Farrukh sir for
Not at all.
Sorry,
Farrukh can give it to Farrukh. Yes.
and thank you all of you and the tea is served outside at anyone's guest. Congratulations, actually, mashallah, major compliment. Mashallah, now we have amazing stuff.
अब हम publicly तो नहीं कह सकते